Welcome, everybody. And panelists, we're going to all introduce ourselves, but I'll start with me. I'm a member of the Wisconsin Arts Board, Jane Herring from Kenosha. And this is my second term on the Wisconsin Arts Board. And I find that I keep learning as I'm going. And you folks really are doing all the very hard work of what the Wisconsin Arts Board presents to our community. So ahead of time, I will thank you for all the hard work that you are doing. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about each of you. Like I said, I'm a member of the Wisconsin Arts Board, and I am a glass artist in Kenosha. And Erin, why don't we start with you?
Okay, I'm Erin Aldridge. I am up in Superior, Wisconsin. I teach at UW Superior in the music department. I'm also a member of the professional symphony up here, the Duluth Superior Symphony Orchestra, and my main instrument is violin.
Wonderful. Thanks, Erin. Samara?
Hi, I'm Samara Frame. I am over here at UW Madison's Division of the Arts. So I come from a theater background. I've been a professional theater actor and film person my whole adult life. Recently came out of Forward Theater Company and have spent most of my adult life in nonprofits. And yeah, so now I'm serving in this capacity over at UW.
Great, thank you. Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily Fritz. I am the Youth and Family Coordinator over at the Leaki Woodson Art Museum. And prior to that, I was an elementary school teacher, taught fifth grade for 4 wonderful years. But I've always worked in education in some capacity, whether that be in non-traditional education or classroom teaching. So I love it.
Great, thank you. Frank?
Good morning. My name is Frank Juarez. I am a high school art teacher at Sheboygan North High School in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I am a publisher of Artos magazine. Recently became editor-in-chief of School Arts magazine. Photographer and I used to be a former board member for Arts Wisconsin back in the day. So
Great, thanks, Frank. Oscar?
Hey everybody, Oscar. I'm based out of Milwaukee. I'm the Director of Arts Education at Walker's Point Center for the Arts. So yeah, just overseeing all the art programming, and personally I do photography and paintings myself.
Wonderful, thanks. And Caitlin, should both you and Dale introduce
Yeah,
yourselves?
be great. And thank you
All right,
again.
Dale?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I tried to turn my video on, but it's not working. But my name is Dale Johnson. I'm a grant and information specialist here. Well, there it is at the Arts Board, and I'm just going to be in the background tabulating your scores today.
Great, thank you. And Caitlin?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Caitlin Burrell. I'm the Folk and Traditional Arts Coordinator at the Arts Board, and I also work kind of managing our arts education grant as well. And these panels are my favorite part of the year. So I'm so glad and grateful for your all's time and expertise in reviewing them. I know that it is no small task or commitment. So we just so appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the discussion this morning. And like I said, Jane and I will do one more scripted orientation, and then we will just see if you have any questions, and then we'll dive in.
Okay, so should we begin now with the Wisconsin Arts Board in brief?
Exactly, yes.
All right. So my turn to start, kind of sound like an automaton, so we'll go with this. The Wisconsin Arts Board, established in 1973, is the state agency which nurtures creativity, cultivates expression, promotes the arts, supports the arts in education, stimulates community and economic development, and serves as a resource for people of every culture and heritage. Our vision is inspired by a quote from the late Robert E. Gard, Professor Emeritus of Community Theater, University of Wisconsin. If we are seeking in America, let it be for the reality of democracy in the arts. Let art begin at home and let it spread through the children and the parents and through the schools and the institutions and through government. And let us start by acceptance, not negation, acceptance that the arts are important everywhere and that they can exist and flourish in small places as well as large, with money or without it, according to the will of the people. Let us put firmly and permanently aside the cliche that the arts are a frill. Let us accept the goodness of art where we are now and expand its worth in the places where people live. End of quote. We embrace this vision. It guides our belief, the Wisconsin Arts Board belief, that the arts are basic to human life and essential to the human spirit. And now for the Wisconsin Arts Board values: imagination, creativity, curiosity, freedom of expression, respect and appreciation for all cultures and people, artistic quality, a broad definition of the arts, audience and patron development, community engagement. A major portion of the agency's biannual appropriation from the Wisconsin State Legislature is dispersed to eligible artists and nonprofit organizations in the form of matching grants. Additional funds for grants are also allocated to the WAB by the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency. The board itself consists of 15 voting members who are appointed by the governor of Wisconsin. Those members serve without compensation for a minimum of 1 3-year term. Members of the board are responsible for establishing the agency policies and programs and for approving all grant awards. The board meets a minimum of 4 times per year. All meetings are open to the public. The board employs an executive director. As chief administrative officer, the director supervises the WAB staff, programs, and day-to-day operations. The agency's full-time program staff implement policies and programs, including the grants, and provide technical and informational services to the public. And over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks, Jane. The arts education component of the Creative Communities Grant Program provides leadership, services, and financial support to create and provide opportunities for quality arts experiences for all Wisconsin K-12 students. The goals of the art education component of the Creative Communities Program are to involve students and teachers in the exploration of the creative process of a selected art form, to provide broad cultural and geographic access to quality arts experiences, and to assist and support artists working in arts education, in the arts and arts education. The role of panelists. So your role today is to provide expert assistance to the Wisconsin Arts Board in its grant-making decisions to help keep the board informed regarding needs and trends that you see. Today, you will be reviewing grant applications according to established review criteria and making recommendations to the board. We would like you to apprise the board of needs and trends within your field and community, either through your general discussion of applications or in written assessments for board consideration. We would greatly welcome your input, and we value any suggestions and recommendations you would like to make on the whole grant evaluation process. And I will pass it back to Jane for the role of the panel chair.
The role of the panel chair is both informational and procedural. The chair is responsible for providing information regarding Wisconsin Art Board policy and ensuring the panel meetings progress in an orderly fashion according to established procedures. The chair is a non-voting facilitator whose job is to ensure that each panelist's point of view is given ample consideration throughout the review of each application. The panel chair convenes the meeting, reviews the board's conflict of interest policy and determines whether possible conflicts exist, and guides the panel through the review by serving as timekeeper and discussion monitor. Panelists should focus their deliberations on how each application's proposal meets the established review criteria. The chair may occasionally need to refocus the panel toward that end. Panel discussion should always be constructive, regardless of whether it is positive or negative. At the May board meeting, the panel chair will report the panel's recommendations. A written record of those recommendations and a summary of comments will be provided by staff to facilitate this process. Panel chairs will clarify these comments if requested by the board. The chair may also wish to comment on any trends or needs identified by the panel or make general observations regarding the overall nature of grant requests. We would greatly value constructive comments and remarks on each application. Panel comments are sent to all applicants when they are notified of the outcome of their grant application.
And I'll chime in there because we haven't revised this in a minute, but because we do this, we used to convene in person, now we live stream it. So we don't as often send those written comments, but if requested, we will send written comments to applicants. But it is being live streamed, so they will have access this way, and it will be archived also on our YouTube channel. So the role of staff, I will be staffing the panel today with technical assistance from Dale Johnson. Staff can answer technical questions related to eligibility, whether an applicant submitted required budgets, or if they ask for assistance in the grant writing process. Staff cannot make any qualitative artistic judgments or tell you their opinion of the organization or artist's work. Each application will be evaluated based on the purpose of the Creative Communities program, the goals for the arts education component, and specifically on the criteria outlined on your score sheets. You will be asked to score each application individually from 1 to 100 based on the review criteria. However you score, we ask that you just be consistent throughout the day. So maybe don't, start really hard and then after lunch get easier, or vice versa. And if you don't give a perfect score, and of course we don't anticipate that you will in every instance, we just ask that you please explain either in your written or verbal comments, your feedback on that particular criterion. After submitting all final reviews, each applicant's points will be averaged and ranked. You will then look at the ranking to identify whether or not you see natural breaks and where you want to put the floor, beneath which score no applications will receive funding. You have already vetted an earlier version of these applications in phase 1, so it's presumed that the bulk of these are worthy of funding. However, based on the additional information provided in the phase 2 applications, the panel may decide that some do not fully meet the funding criteria and so are not recommended for funding. Please note that if an applicant receives less than 50 points out of the 100, they will be automatically taken out of consideration for a grant this year. And we do like to note that you will not be asked to deal with dollar amounts. We will just, once we've averaged and ranked those scores, we will just have you look at those scores and then, reach a consensus on where you'd recommend setting a floor. And Jane, I'll pass it back to you.
So what happens after today? As noted previously, the panel chair takes the panel recommendations to the full board in May. After review and ratification of the panel's recommendations by the Arts Board members at their May meeting, applicants will be notified of the grant decisions by June. So I'm going to move on to the conflict of interest policy. You have received that form. In the unlikely circumstance that you are asked to review an application of an organization with which you or a person with whom you have a familiar relationship are associated, we ask you to withdraw from all consideration of that application, including participating in subsequent stages of discussion regarding that applicant's relative ranking. The panel should not take any action on any application which would financially benefit a member of the advisory panel or someone with whom a member has a familial relationship. Panelists should be upfront about their ability to judge an application objectively. The perception of conflict should be considered and avoided.
Thanks, Jane. And we have just one conflict that I've noted. And so, Erin, when that application comes up, we'll say, go ahead, turn your screen off, walk away for 10 minutes and come back. So that is the only one. Any other last minute conflicts of interest? No, great. All right, so taping of the meeting. So as you've already observed and we've mentioned, we are recording and live streaming this meeting because it is an open meeting. Regarding the appeals process, we would like to let you know that if an applicant may only make an appeal based on procedural errors and not on the basis of artistic judgment. So that is our one last quick orientation. Do we have any questions before we get started with the review process? Oh, and George has joined us. George, you want to say good morning?
Morning, everyone. So I join you to say thank you. That's my role today, is to say thank you, because it's a very important thing for those who have applied to have your critical eye on these things. And when I say critical, that's positive and negative, but have your eye on this. And as you have experienced, it's not just the day, but it's the preparation for the day that is so important. So thank you for setting aside the time to do this, both before the meeting and now as you embark on the experience. So best of luck to you. And again, thanks.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, George. So are we set to begin with our first review?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first applicant is Art Start Incorporated from Milwaukee, and they are requesting $6,000. Our first reader is Samara Frame. Samara? Hi.
Hi. That was great. You got me. You did the first little bit, so now I know what I can do. Okay, so this is Art Start Incorporated. I'm just meant to share a little bit about the info and then the pros and the cons maybe. So the specific program is called the Emerging Artist Creative Career Internship. And ultimately their goal is to provide access for Milwaukee youth to toward creative career development, career readiness for teens and young adults. The way they do this is through industry projects, through community partnerships, and through creative career travel. So this is a program that started, I think, in the 70s in New York, and 71 maybe, and it is now in Milwaukee. They've brought it here in 2017. And so it's really about teens, grades 9 through 12, occasionally some older folks, really being ready, having hands-on career opportunities that they will come out with deliverables at the end of this 9-month program. They are paid internships. It is 100% non-dominant population, a pretty wide range of non-dominant population. It serves about 10 youth, and its goals are to lift systemic barriers. They also are working with the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development for apprenticeships. And according to their proposal, there are none for this particular kind of creative sector in Wisconsin. And so they're really trying to build that and create that. So here are a couple of thoughts. I thought it was one of the strongest proposals I read, maybe the strongest proposal. There's strong alignment. It's a very deep focus versus broad. So it's a very expensive program, and it serves a very small number of youth. But they're traveling, they're having, you would have seen probably their supporting material, which is really impressive and comprehensive. And I think it creates something, these deliverables that these youth can really bring with them into, their next level of career as like part of their resume process. Budget is detailed, strong organization, strong support from other grants and foundations. And I think it's important to note that compensation for internships and young people in this field is really critical. And so they are compensating to the tune, maybe, I did a little basic math, but it's, could be $1,000 or $2,000 that these folks are getting. Somebody keep me on time here. I'm curious about the reflection in the third year. So this is technically the third year of the 3-year program, I believe. Let me make sure. Yeah, it's in its third year, it says. So another great, so I'm curious about what they want to do moving forward for sustainability, especially because it's so expensive. They subsidize public transport. They encourage people to create in their native language. They have strong partnerships, strong social work standards as their model. Like I said, their supporting documentation is artistic and so compelling and such high quality, qualitative and quantitative eval procedures. So I was impressed with that. And I think overall, the other thing I would say is that they prioritize youth-driven activities. So the artists get to choose. They are not told, you're going to do theater performance now. It could be fashion design. It could be hip hop. It could be, music production. So they really create an artist-centric programming priority. Yeah, and I think that's my high level 2 minutes.
Yeah, and it actually was closer to 4, just so that we can
Dang
start
it!
getting it. You did well, though.
Jane, you have to put up a finger for me or something.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
maybe
will
we do
start
a
doing
2-minute
that.
mark.
This is my first one too.
Oh,
Let's
good.
move-
Thank you for your grace.
That was great, though.
Yes,
Thank
you're
you,
great.
Samara.
Thank you. And Oscar, you're the second reader, if you can please chime in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think overall everything got reflected off pretty well on this application. Regarding work sample, yeah, I was able see all the videos that they created, kind of like collaboration piece between, you know, all the teams. Um, but being that it was a third year, I would suggest to this applicant to maybe upload like individual work samples of the interns to kind of see like those deliverables that Samara was talking about, you know. So just to kind of get an idea of how the interns are actually engaging with the community. And that's something as well with the evaluation. I do enjoy that most of the evaluations are focused on the interns, just get their feedback, you know, and get an idea of how they're managing through that. But it would be interesting to see if they are also making these public events and making it accessible for the community. Maybe just try to find a creative way to kind of get the input of the community, see how that was able to influence them into like their everyday life perspective or something like that. But yeah, no, I think overall it was a great application, and yeah, we really have nothing else to say.
Thank you, Oscar.
Okay.
Any of the other panelists have any comments if they were able to read through this in any detail? Looks like we're good.
If we typically, open it up now for discussion. So someone, please get us started. Any other additional comments? And maybe Samara and Oscar covered it, but
Okay.
if not, I'd say go ahead and score then. So your applications on your Smart Simple Home screen should be in that center. I can't think of what if it's initial reviews now, but you should see score boxes at this point. And it will auto calculate as you enter and hit save, but maybe just double check them, because we've had, every once in a while we have one that sneaks by that isn't correct.
And then Dale lets us know when everyone has scored, if I remember right.
Yes, yeah, he will kind of just give us the thumbs up, so I will keep an eye out for that.
And then Caitlin, we hit the submit final review,
Yep.
right, at the end? Okay.
Yep.
My palms are sweating.
First one, you're already.
That's it.
It was great.
Good job,
Nice
Oscar. Thanks
job.
for teaming up on that.
All right, I see 3 of the 5 in. That's great. No rush on those. Okay, great. Thanks, Dale. They are all in.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Let's move on to our second applicant, which is Artists Working in Education, Inc. out of Milwaukee. And Frank, you are the first reader on that one.
Oh, Frank, you're muted.
Rookie mistake. So Artists Working in Education Incorporated are based out of Milwaukee. They are requesting $6,000. And the summary of the project is teaching artists professional development, which is currently implemented in the truck student and artists in residence program. Expansion to teaching artists and aspiring teaching artists of those programs, which aims to strengthen Aw's roster of teaching artists and to Aw's teaching artists. This program focuses, so it's tapping into the local art community based out of Milwaukee, and they're serving Milwaukee area students. Some of the strengths that I've noted is to build a community of practice. As an art educator, professional development is extremely important, especially now. And also providing that space of belonging is very important, you know, for not only adult artists, but also for aspiring, you know, artists as well. That mentorship is also important. And then also the program deepens the impact of arts education in Milwaukee by enhancing the skills and methodologies of all teaching artists, local arts educator, and up and coming teaching artists. And I know a little bit about this program. And so when I look at these proposals, I'm looking at through multiple lenses. Obviously, as an art educator in general, and so I guess some questions that kind of pop into my mind is how are they assessing this need for this program? I mean, it's nice that there's a lot of opportunities being provided for those that are interested in art. But I guess what I'm concerned, I guess I'm concerned as far as like the overall landscape of our education in Milwaukee and what their deficits are and how this program is meeting those deficits. Obviously, by providing this program to artists, I'm just curious as far as, and maybe it's a little too much into it, but I'm curious as far as like what type of training they're receiving. Is it simply just teaching, you know, skills, techniques, or is it really focused on, you know, specific assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, or is it dealing with, or is diving into like standard-based curriculum of some sort? And so those are the things that are kind of popping in my mind. But I'm also curious as far as, and so I'll be jumping kind of back and forth. But I'm also curious as far as like what the track record is after the fact. You know, after these all teaching artists have fulfilled their responsibility, where have they gone? Did they go into art education as an art teacher? And also the students that were impacted by this program, like what are their successes? Like how effective how effective are these professional developments that are being provided to people that are involved? So.
Okay, thank you, Frank. I think it's time to move on to Aaron's second reading on that. But when we open it up to discussion, I'll be interested to know if those questions you have affect your support of this grant application. So let's move on to Aaron. Aaron, if you can, yes, you did unmute yourself. Thank you.
I agree with Frank's assessment. I had a couple questions as well. The big ones for me, I was looking at the assessment, and I think Frank was kind of getting at this, and I said they specifically said they will not be measuring results of student learning, but I think that's perhaps at the crux of what needs to happen in some way, and it's not a matter of whether the results are. I think they need to, I'm not saying this well, they need to measure that the students are learning, not the quality. The quality of learning, but not the quality of the project. There we go. The other thing that I thought they started down this road, and I think it's a really interesting possibility, which is they talked about the building is a little bit tricky in terms of accessibility, and they wanted to offer it with a hybrid, but I would have loved to have heard more like, what does that actually look like? I thought it was an added component, and I think it's great that they're thinking in that direction, but I would have loved to have heard more. And those are my two main points.
Thank you, Aaron. Let's open it up to discussion of the entire panel, and including that how you feel these questions each of you have expressed affect the viability of this application. Who wants to go first? Everybody's muted.
And we don't, I'd say you don't need to say like yes or no on this one, but I do think that, if any of you have responses to Frank's questions, because to me, it sounds like some of those responses in terms of maybe the why and the assessment piece could have been strengthened. And I think that's really helpful feedback. So yes, Samara, go ahead.
I had that also, just the evaluation piece felt a little bit vague and like it could have been more robust. I had some questions. There were a few things that for me were unclear, especially given like the budget deficit. I love that they're trying to really cut spending and look at other resources. I'm unclear of who the youth participants are, kind of to your point, Frank. I was also a little unclear about this being a new component of an existing program in the sense that it's an expansion. I wasn't clear who was receiving the training. So it talked about expanding to other teaching artists, but then there's a part where it says that the sessions are open to AWE's roster of teaching artists. So I was just unclear, are we broadening it out to the wider community of teaching artists, or is it still insular just to them? Which has an effect on my, on my judgment of reach. Yeah, there were some things that were, I had an idea too, this whole idea of, they were talking about funding needs. If they were, if they were going to broaden it out, maybe there is a small fee structure that could bring in some income for them and also make it more widely available to the community of other teaching artists. So like you said, Frank, it's a strong need for teaching the teachers, and I just needed a little more clarity, a little more oomph.
I agree with that as well. A lot of my questions centered around similarly who was going to be involved in the professional development sessions, because it does bounce around quite frequently. Like even going back and looking right now at their assessment piece for arts learning, it talks about how classroom teachers are going to be the ones providing their feedback, but then up above it is only open to their roster of artists. It's unclear on how people are able to access that roster. Is that something that's open to art educators that they could join at the beginning of the year? I think a lot of my thoughts were surrounding the need for this program. Professional development, especially for teachers, arts teachers especially, is incredibly difficult to come by quality professional development for those folks. I think they have a really good opportunity maybe to pair with some local school districts, really focus on a particular grade level and the needs that those schools are experiencing there, and develop professional development surrounding those schools that would then also service the schools and the programs that they are running. Have like a dual impact for that. But yeah, I think clarity on who this project is actually serving would be helpful.
Anyone else have a comment?
Yeah, I think it's more commenting to yes to how or who I presume this will kind of impact a little bit more. AW tends to work a lot with just local artists who already have the craft to kind of partake in any project they want to send them to either their school or a community organization. I think this might be just a response on helping, like, those artists who know the craft, know how to, partake and be creative, but it's more of kind of helping them break down that process to be able to instruct the process to the youth that are going to be working with them. But yeah, more of like the curriculum, kind of like what Frank brought up, that is a little bit kind of like not as understanding in here. It's also kind of meeting just once a month, I think is what I read. We'll kind of like slow down the process, kind of talking what Emily brought up. It is pretty hard kind of having folks understand the art educational side of things, rather than an artist just looking at it. So that's how I was able to read it. I mean, it's a great proposal as to, trying to elevate their already existing programming. I think it's more of the fact that they've been finding artists who are interested but can't formally kind of like instruct and break down the process.
Thanks, Oscar. It sounds like there are some questions there. So I would say, go ahead and consider those and go ahead and score if there's no other comments. Okay, thanks, Dale. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to our third applicant, which is the Betty Bryn Children's Museum out of Milwaukee. And Emily, you are our first reader on this one.
All right. So as you said, the Betty Bryn Children's Museum is located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They are asking for $6,000 of grant funding, which would support the second year of their community arts partnership. They and other community members in Milwaukee have all noticed the segregation issues that Milwaukee struggles with, as well as housing, education, and employment disparities. And the museum has really tried to hone in on elements that they would be able to contribute in order to help build artistic communities and build more cultural awareness in Milwaukee. So they are starting with building awareness and empathy in the youngest learners. This program is focused on creating authentic cultural engagement through cultural performers, including Bembe Dance and Drums, Cricket Chinese Academy, Ukraine Dance, and then an organization called Hands on Hawaii. They are very heavy on community engagement. In fact, this program really depends on the engagement of local artists and folk artists to be able to run, to be able to be sustained. They are also very in touch with the community that they are serving. So because this is their second year, the evaluations from the first year were used a great deal in developing what the second year would look like. They added more performers. They enriched the different cultures that would be available to be shown through the performances. They also allowed these performances to take place in a section of the museum that is free for everyone to access. So you don't need to pay museum admission. You don't need to pay to view the performance. Anyone is able to participate. And then also increased the frequency that these performances would be occurring, so that they occur on the free, I believe it's the first Thursday of every month. So that again, community members are able to access the program without worrying about costs that is associated with it. That said, I did have a question surrounding this because some of the programs are free for folks to attend. Some of the programs they noted are not free. So I was unsure how they were determining which programs would be available for the entire community and which programs would require museum admission or additional cost for folks to participate in. They also are not entirely clear about what would be involved in these performances. So there is an element, I believe, that would suggest that there's some sort of like project or engagement post-performance, but they don't really say what that engagement would be. It appears that it would be up to the performer to develop that, which would be fine, but some clarity and maybe on how that is going to run for folks would be helpful. The other spot that I was a bit unclear about was the project timeline. The dates that they use for their project timeline are actually from 2023. So I don't know if that was maybe just a typo and they meant that those are the dates that are running in 2024, or if that wasn't fully updated in the proposal. I think that this project would be incredible to continue in that community space. There definitely is a need for it, and based off of community response from the evaluations that they noted in the proposal, the community has come out really in full support of this program. It appears that folks are really excited that that's there, and it would be a great space for this to continue for them.
Thanks, Emily. And let's move on to Frank for the second reading. Oh, Frank, you're muted if you can.
Yeah. So some things that kind of stood out was to focus on social emotional learning of these kids, giving them a sense of belonging, exposing them to various cultures. The program is definitely heavy on community support and partnership, which is great. There's a lot of cultural variety. I guess my only question is kind of piggybacking off of Emily is how inclusive is this programming to students? I do like the fact that they're you know, kind of celebrating all cultures, most likely from those communities. But then, as a result, how accessible is it if there's some type of barrier for those that are free and those that are not free?
Thanks, Frank. What about the rest of the panelists? Any kind of feedback on this particular application?
Yeah, I think this application is trying to, pinpoint all the different cultures and kind of like different communities here in Milwaukee. Um, but I am kind of just reading it more as like they're just trying to find different ways to have more people come into their space, and kind of track those numbers. It would just be interesting to kind of see, yeah, like with performances, like how are the youth being involved? Like they're going to start, collaborating with different schools. Is there a way they're going to kind of like work with specific classrooms to also partake on the performances, or, kind of just build up that curriculum with the specific kind of culture they're hitting on? Um, and I think what was kind of intriguing too, I was looking at the board and staff list. Their staff is pretty huge, but they only have like 3 educators. So that in itself too is kind of like I would understand why like the educational standpoints not really shown in the application. With that respect, yeah.
Any other comments? Erin?
I would just piggyback on that. I was, in terms of the assessment, again, I think this goes to what Oscar was saying, there's no kind of assessment on the arts learning portion. So that's where again, getting at the educational aspect of it, what they're trying to do is great, but how are they actually getting at that was my question.
Erin, my comment is kind of similar to that in the sense of outreach. I think it's great what they're doing, very multicultural, unique and exciting. I want to know more about how they're targeting non-dominant communities that are being represented on the, stage here. So are they reaching out to target Indigenous communities, communities of color, so that, the art and the culture that is being represented is also mirrored by the participants, which I think is a really important part that we can't, we have to move out of, I'm not saying this is, but out of a more performative space and into a more authentic, engaged space. So that was my biggest question here about, and I think the assessment would be an important part of that. Who are you really reaching? I also wanted to just call in the sense of, anyway, that goes more to this whole with community rather than for community. And I go back to that on a lot of these. It's a really helpful way for me to remember how we're working with our community. So that's something. I also wanted a little bit more on the accessibility, but that came up for me quite a lot. Otherwise, I think it was a strong.
Thank you all. Really thoughtful feedback on that one. I will say too, Emily, to your question about the timeline, I noted that as well. And I think that, the dates they listed, it's an eligibility issue there to see, January 1 through the end of this year. I think that depending on your scores and your recommendations, we would go back to them and say, what are the expenses, that you're requesting specific to that July 1 through, June 30, 2025 date. So thanks for calling that out.
I think
Since Jane, do you mind if I ask a quick question? I noticed a couple times that, just like a protocol question, that general operating expenses are excluded from the list of things that we fund. And I noticed that on some of the proposals, it is, kind of an other operating expenses is marked as a request for support. Is that something where we would want to go back, or is it something that is just kind of rises to the surface depending on the scores? Do we need to take that into consideration?
Good question. I think that on the project budget form, I think that you're probably talking about that remaining operating expenses. And because that's specific to the project. We don't consider those, it's not like general operating
Fantastic.
support. So
That's
no
great.
issue there. I think that if you see that everything is going toward, remaining operating expenses, I would think it would be reasonable to have some questions there, but not in terms of an eligibility issue as an
Excellent.
expense. Good question.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to scoring on this one.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Moving on now to the Boys and Girls Club of Kenosha, Inc. from Kenosha. And Oscar, you are our first reader today.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, this application is based out of Kenosha. They're requesting 6,000, and this is their second year of this project for Teen Center. It's an art program for all the teens who go there after school. It's kind of more of just them shedding light to all the different like artistic mediums and or careers that teens can then end up pursuing as they grow older. They also collaborate with Carthage College and UW Parkside on certain kind of projects that the teens actually go out to these colleges and work in the studios there. Um, they also end up kind of displaying other art as well, which I thought was pretty incredible to kind of hear about. Teens always just seeing their artwork hung up. That in itself already boosts like their self-esteem. Um, Strengths regarding this application, I think it's the call for arts regarding like in this organization, kind of just disrupting the chaotic world that the teens are kind of going through, and so with art they're able to kind of combat that. The evaluation is also I really enjoyed reading about how they have a lot of one-on-ones with the teens to kind of get that direct input and understanding how this program has been influencing them. Um, but just something I would kind of like give feedback to is like going back to the eval, but it's more of getting perspective from the colleges and those teaching artists that are coming out of the colleges to kind of get a better understanding, see what worked, what didn't. And so if they do plan on continuing this program from years on, kind of get a good foundation regarding like these type of workshops that they'll be doing with all the teams.
Thanks, Oscar. And Emily.
I think I had just like two, I don't know, questions, maybe is the best way to phrase it. I really appreciated the way that they are allowing students to have access to a really wide variety of arts education. I thought that they did a really great job about being very intentional about exposing kids to whatever they would like to make and letting them really experience a lot of things that they might not have access to otherwise. I did have a question about accessibility for folks joining the program. They when they were talking about who was able to join the program, had listed that they would be picking participants out of their teen club, but based off of students who have, they said good school attendance and then like positive program participants, but they are looking at like reducing risky behaviors in teen and youth and giving those kids an outlet. So it felt strange maybe for me that they're qualifying that based off of kids who have quote unquote like good school attendance. I don't know what metric they would be using maybe to qualify that. And then also would the availability be open to students as the sessions rotate? So I think they're doing like 4 different sessions. Would other students have access to those sessions as they continue, or is it just going to be that same core group of kids the entire time? And then I guess the other question going along with that is how is that being communicated to the students who are part of that teen council? I think they have to be really intentional with the way that they are communicating that if they're using attendance and program participation as their metric. Just because for a lot of those kids, especially like school attendance, sometimes isn't something that's in their control. So it, I don't know, feels a bit punitive that would be the way that they're deciding who gets to participate in the program.
Thanks, Emily. And let's open it up to the entire group for discussion.
So 3 things kind of popped into my head. Number one, to kind of respond off of Emily, these, I think, just from my own experience, these types of programs filter into the art rooms, so they might ask art teachers for recommendations. The second thing too, and I often struggle with this, but to me, this seems more like an enrichment opportunity versus, enrichment opportunity versus teaching actual curriculum. And the third thing too is, to give this program a deeper layer, why wouldn't you include those at-risk students as an opportunity to uplift them, give them confidence, give them the skills and the ability and the freedom to create, right? I think those are the students that tend to need most guidance than those that are doing very well in school.
Thank you, Frank. Others? Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments. Are we ready to move to scoring then? Okay, let's do that. Great, thank you all. Our next application is the Dare to Dream Theater. And Erin, if you can begin, please.
This is Dare to Dream Theater Company. Are they Manitowoc or Sheboygan? Because I saw 2 different things on 2 different forms.
I think of them
Sheboygan.
at Manitowoc, but are
Okay.
they in Sheboygan? I think they work in both communities.
Gotcha. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that they're asking for $6,000. This is their second year of offering this program. They have a short-term goal to work with at least 75 young people and 25 adults with accessibility accommodations. They target individuals with disabilities or cognitive and development barriers. They found by listening to the community that there was a gap in programming, specifically in theater for persons with disabilities. Parents were reaching out to them. Parents were advocating for their children to have some available programming. They build self-awareness. The program was aware and assessing of the areas of weakness in regard to serving individuals with disabilities. The first time the program was offered, they have a lot of community partnerships, including the YMCA, who puts on Play is Healing. RCS Empowers and Camp Evergreen. In year 2, they want to continue partnerships with Mental Health America, Autism Society of Greater Wisconsin, Camp Evergreen, RCS Empowers, and area school districts. And part of what I found they have a pretty robust plan of what they want to do in year 2, which I think is both great and it actually is a little bit problematic. The big thing that seems to be set is the Play is Healing. This is in the Mead Library in Sheboygan. And they would program playtime in the parks on Fridays during the summer, and they would provide literature-inspired sensory and story dramatic play for young people and individuals on the spectrum. So in essence, it would be a pop-up situation. So a couple, and I think what they're trying to do and build mental health awareness, I think it's fantastic. My issue was I did not find a lot of specificity in terms of what their plans were for the coming year. A lot of, well, we're still in talks. So, and we're still negotiating. And so it's hard for me. I think what they want to do is excellent. I think there's not enough specificity there. And they are consulting with the Mental Health America and Autism Society of America to identify gaps, but I would like to know how. What metrics are they using? What are they doing? The other big issue for me was they were doing evaluation from year 1, but they still don't have those results. And there was also no explanation as to why the results were not there. And Samara, if I missed something, if I missed that, please let me know, but I just didn't. They're still waiting on results from year 1, but we'll use those to assess moving forward. But who's taking ownership of the assessment and who's overseeing things? So those were kind of my 2 big notes.
Thank you, Erin. Samara?
A lot of similar thoughts. My overall comments were really about, I think it's a very a commendable, a very strong idea for a place that surely needs, this kind of service for accessibility initiative. A similar one. I did a similar one for my previous organization, and I would want to speak for a second at how important it is to grow those authentic partnerships over time, as with any community that's underrepresented. So on one hand, I can see I can see what you're saying, Erin, and also I want to allow space that if you're going to do it right, you have to do it in a way that builds trust over time. And so I love that they have these partnerships. I comment, my biggest thing was I said, you really need to show documentation and video material if you want to continue to apply for funding of this kind. I felt like they were using other models that they want to base their programming upon. And I said, the partnerships are good descriptors of the other work they're doing, but they don't tell us about your specific work. So yeah, kind of a similar thing that Erin was saying. I always appreciate it when there's a gap and they find a way to fill it. I like that. And yeah, I wrote, please commit as part of your planning to gather and curate documentation, assessment, photos. I think they need to shore up their gathering and the really the administrative piece of this in a way they don't have yet. So I support it, and I hope that continues, and I hope they find some tangible things to grab onto.
Thank you, Samara. Opening it up to the entire group for discussion. Are there any other comments that you'd like to make?
I'll just say thank you both for that. Really, I think that will be really constructive feedback for Dare to Dream. And I would say, make the assessment based on what's in front of you. And with the understanding that it sounds like there are quite a few questions and just the specifics that you were really looking for. And it is so challenging not to say more because they're a fantastic organization, but it sounds like maybe an additional year to follow through on that phase 1 and then come back for funding for a phase 2 in a, after one more year might have strengthened the application. That's my sense there. So I will leave it to you all at this point. Thank you.
You know what else I love? Can I just say one more thing? I want to continue to emphasize artist compensation as an important piece of a budget. So I would encourage them to grow that piece of it. But the other thing is sometimes I love the simplicity of a scope of something, like taking a book and bringing it to life. I think there's great value in sometimes stripping it down, especially depending on who your audience is and your population. So that was one of the things I liked about this. It did feel fairly simple in that type of scope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to scoring then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Terrific. Our next applicant is Enrichment Through Culture, Etc., Inc. from Cumberland. And Emily, you have the first read on that.
Right. Enrichment Through Culture is an organization that primarily serves Cumberland, Wisconsin. And they are requesting $6,000 to fund the second year of their program, Art Making Mondays. This program was born from the goal of closing the gap in after-school arts opportunities for youth in the community. And the program really hones in on the idea that creativity, as they said, is a human birthright. And everyone should have the ability to embrace that and allow that to be cultivated. Local artists and educators are assisting in exposing students to a variety of mediums with the goal of having those students, I believe, participate in the 32nd annual celebration of the arts. It was a bit unclear if that was the goal that they were going for, to have student art be displayed there, or if there were other things at play in that mix as well. Some strengths for this application: community involvement is integral to this program. to the point that truly, I don't think that this program would be able to run if it wasn't for the exceptionally dedicated core of volunteers that they have at the heart of this program. It's very, very clear that everyone who is involved really deeply cares about the success of this program and making sure that these kids have access to arts education. They definitely seem like they give the vibe of this proposal really gives like a scrappy group of folks coming together to do what it takes to allow these kids to have that experience. They've tried to really intentionally pick artists who are passionate about working with kids and have ways to include social emotional learning through art therapy and different art mediums. I would love to see them maybe incorporate more mediums, as it does seem to be very like painting centric, and would be great to allow them to experience more things, including like collage and different things like that. Although they did, I think, say somewhere in there that there was juggling. I think that was involved as well. So there could be more things on the horizon. Some areas maybe that were a concern for me were that although this proposal is in its second year, they did not include evaluation efforts from the year prior to talk about how that was impacting them moving forward. There was also some concern for me over the financial feasibility of the project. They did say that they were in the midst of a successful fundraising campaign, but then there is also a $6,000 debt that is noted on their budgeting record as well. So I'm unclear about what that is from, or maybe what they're doing to mitigate that. It's also not particularly clear to me if the focus of this program is centralized on the group of 30 participants that were from the original pilot last year. If more students are going to be able to participate that, if they'll be opening it up to a wider swatch of the community. And then it does also seem like this program's goal is more to host fundraising events. Like they mentioned several times, like an invitation to their spaghetti dinner as part of their proposal. There's a fundraising talent show. And then the celebration of the arts and Island City music series, which will be really incredible opportunities for those kids to show the art that they're making. It would be very, very cool, a great way to engage the community. But there also is another kind of strange mention about using those things as fundraising opportunities for the organization. So unclear maybe what the motives are for that particular piece.
Thank you, Emily. Frank. Frank, can you unmute?
I know, I always forget.
I know the feeling.
So just a couple of things. I do like the fact that, you know, they're targeting rural communities. I often feel like they're the one that suffer the most when it comes to resources. And which results in lack of after school opportunities for their youth. Kind of a lot of piggybacking today. Off of what Samara had mentioned about fair compensation for instructors. I think that's something that is important. I can't recall how much instructors are getting paid, but just looking at you know, things in general, I often feel like it sounds kind of weird, but sometimes I feel like instructors are a little undervalued in terms of fair compensation. Maybe they're not quite sure how to compensate an artist for their time and expertise. And another thing too, the fact that it's run by volunteers. I'm just curious as far as like how sustainable that practice is, especially if the program continues to grow. The last group had about 30. You know, as it continues to grow, what type of support is needed? And obviously, you know, volunteers. I don't think there's terms per se. You know, you know, so those are just things that I'm kind of wondering, like sustainability of a program that may be of a need. And let's see here. Once again, they're providing students with opportunities to develop their creative process, which is awesome. And also, one thing that I was thinking about is with programming, when we do programming, we don't do it for once, we do it multiple times, right? And so I'm just curious as far as like what type of data collection have they collected after their initial program. I think that's very important to determine which pathway they need to take in order for it to be successful.
Thank you, Frank. Other panelists like to chime in.
Yeah, I would like to say there was a lot of ambiguity, and I want to say I think it's fantastic that it's in rural communities and clearly they need it. One of my questions was how are they, going back to what Samara said, how are they working with the community? They're clearly providing a service for the community, but I think in the narrative, there was no addressing of what they learned from the first year of implementation. And that actually was a question for me. And I think they didn't realize, or it wasn't clear to them because this is the second year, but I think this is the first time they're putting in a proposal, but there was no talk about what they've learned from the first year that I picked up on. So I think that self-assessment piece is reflectiveness is kind of critical and would be helpful in taking this forward. And the other question that I had is there was no answer to the metrics used. So my question was about the metrics and also like what kind of integration from the community are they getting in terms of feedback? That's something I didn't quite pick up on.
Erin, could I jump in on that? I literally had the same comments about the width and about the learning from the previous year.
How is it possible?
How are you engaging with the community? I said, at some point I said, I love this idea of accessibility around you walk over, you scoop those kids up from the school, you walk across the street to the church. I mean, that's accessibility, in a way at its best, transportation, this. But, we're using the term non-dominant, populations. That population is in every corner of our country. And so I would love to see a little bit more engagement with that. The only other thing that I wanted, I really like this idea. I like that there's not a product expected, that it's, as Frank said, it's really about the process.
Is it possible?
There was something when they were talking about evaluation, as you said, Erin, and I would strongly encourage them to find a better metric of this. They talked about increase equity they talked about measuring outward self-confidence. And I just really want to emphasize that, we have to have a way to evaluate increasing equity for kids who may not express it in that way. Maybe they're introverts, maybe they express in a different way, and that isn't necessarily a reflection of their success. And so I really would encourage them to create some kind of evaluation form and be careful with their choice of words in that sense of equity. Yeah, that was all I wanted to jump.
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to scoring then. Thank you all. Great,
Thank
thank
you
you, Dan. So we have the Greater Milwaukee El Sistema Inc. from Waukesha, and our first reader on that is back to Frank.
So let's see here. So this is a week-long summer camp program which is targeted at underprivileged youth in the greater Milwaukee and Waukesha areas to provide them with skills aimed to build community confidence, improve on social skills, self-esteem, and self-discipline through music and different art forms. In parentheses, musicianship, theater, and service learning. And they're asking for $5,750. And I think this program is it feels like it's more focused on like art appreciation, but it's also about making this program accessible to students that may not take these courses, especially, in the arts. And also, let's see what else I got here. And also to kind of instill these skills that they may not be accustomed to, especially with social skills. We're kind of 4 years out of, no, yeah, 4 years since the pandemic, and I always have to reference this, and I think a lot of those social skills and soft skills were lost. And even today, as an educator, those are things that are still at the forefront in our education, is how to get kids to be social and not be on their phones, how to converse with their classmates. And so I do like the fact that this program is encompassing, not only art appreciation, but also how to exist or live in a community of peers. And a question that I have, in the assessment, obviously survey is kind of the go-to way of data collection, but in the assessment, it does say that the executive director is going to do one-on-one interviews with each of the participants. And so what I'm just curious is what that will look like. Granted that this program are going to have a lot of students. And so, how is that time being carved out, and what type of collection is that ED looking for? Is it a yes or no answer? Is it more of like specific responses? So I'm just kind of curious as far as the assessment is concerned. And let's see here. Yep, that's all I have.
Thanks, Frank. Let's move on to Erin.
Actually have excuse me, I have very little to add. I want to highlight something that I'm a big advocate of, and that's older students mentoring younger students. I think mentorship is a really powerful tool. I think that's awesome. I like that they're targeting first-time camp participants who have zero background in music and theater. I think that's how we build future generations of support for the arts and engagement in the arts. And my question was actually the same as Frank's, was about the assessment piece. I know they also talked about that there would be assessment through the final project, but there was no really clear way of metrics or assessment that was presented for that. So that's all I have.
Any of the other panelists would like to chime in on this one?
I'm similar.
Tamara?
Mine was really just about the evaluation, which I feel like sort of has been covered. It was about needing, yeah, I was curious about the response from families with housing insecurities, because I know that can be such a specific challenge. And but it sounds like they've honed their partnerships and found some success. But yeah, it was just really needing more feedback, return student evals, so more of the same.
I have a
Others?
question. So in terms of, the type of assessments, is there like I didn't look at this, but is there like a word count when it comes to
For the narrative, Frank, or for specifically for that assessment
assessment? You
evaluation?
know how you have like the different field boxes? Is there like a word count?
We don't have a word count for those, for that evaluation tab. We just ask for, a brief description of the kind of who, what, why pieces of each evaluation method that they select.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, just not in specific this proposal, but just in general, I think one thing we're looking for is specifics. Versus a kind of a general blanket. Granted that we're all coming from different experiences. I'm a visual learner, so I need specific things for me to grab onto versus inferring these things that may not necessarily be there. So that's just my comments on that.
That's helpful. Do you think that a word count would encourage them to include more specific, just to say like, oh, I had 50 words and there's a 250 word count limit, like maybe I should say more? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I would think, if you had like a minimum word count, maybe 20 minimum. But obviously they can go beyond if they want to write, hopefully they don't, but if they want to write 1,000 words, it's wonderful. And then that would allow them to paint a bigger picture for us to really dive into. Because I feel like the assessment is, and I feel this is coming with all of us, it's a huge part of these programs. Obviously we want to fund proposals that are successful and that are effective and that will give, birth to new ideas versus just receiving money for the sake of receiving money and really not being accountable for whatever happens.
Frank, for my part, I totally agree. And I think too, it's that, for me, it's the second and third years of a 3-year where you go, like, I'm looking at the narrative piece, maybe there's language in there that could say like, provide specific examples or something, for example, in this one, as lovely as this is, it says, basically it's saying, through our past evals, we found that everybody really liked it. So we'll continue to do more of the same. And I think there's a deeper need for us to understand, when it's a 3-year project, there needs to be an evolution of the program. And yeah, so that would be another piece of that assessment that could help us to understand. And part of it too is we want to understand where you're struggling, what the obstacles are, because that's also how we all learn as a community together too.
And it
stuff
helps.
was really hard.
Yeah, it helps us to know like, okay, assessment is a piece that really seems to be maybe lacking across many of these applications. So what can we do? Do we need to put in some more specific examples of what, an assessment, what that material might look like, or what a sample response should include? So that's really helpful to hear from you all. And I think we'll come back to it certainly in our final discussion at the end. But Erin, yeah, real quick.
I would just take that and also clarity that you're looking for a response if it is the second year of a project but this is their first time in, or regardless of that, or have two different questions like if this is your first if this is not your first year of this program but your first time applying, how are you viewing assessment, and then the others that have already been given money.
Yeah, that one in particular, that last application was a really challenging one to say. I think they just misunderstood that like you can't put NA there if you're applying for a second year, but your first year applying to the arts board. So that's great. This is really helpful feedback just in terms of the application that we put in front of them. So thank you.
Okay. So move on to scoring of the application for Greater Milwaukee Sistema.
Yeah, I would say go ahead and score, and then we will take a 10-minute break here. So maybe we reconvene at 10:40. Is that enough time for everyone, or?
Sounds
Great.
good. Okay. So we should probably, after they do their scoring, we should probably mute and
Yep. And we'll just leave the recording and live streaming on, but yes, I will mute and I'll probably turn my screen off for a minute here. All right. Y'all are doing great, making great time, pacing yourselves. So
There's Oscar. We're all back. Thank you all. And we are making great time, which is wonderful because who knows where we're going to get bogged down at some point.
right.
But we won't do that, right? Okay, let's now move on to Islands of Brilliance Inc. from Shorewood. And Erin, I think you are our first reader there. Thank you.
Yep, this is Islands of Brilliance from Shorewood. They're asking for $6,000. Quite honestly, I thought this was a very strong proposal. It targets underemployed neurodivergent individuals through art, helping individuals communicate more confidently about their positive characteristics. This is, I think I said this is year 2. The pilot of, they call it the Fellowship, which, sorry, I love Lord of the Rings. So for me, I think it's great, is entering its 3rd month in the communities of Eau Claire, La Crosse, Rice Lake, Tomahawk, Wausau, and Viroqua. They have already seen positive indicators. I love the assessment piece in this particular, like they clearly used assessment from the first year in informing them with this now 2nd year. And workshop facilitators, along with the assessment piece and having evaluations, they are also constantly assessing through the workshops that they're doing, and they're looking for meaningful connections between participants who did not previously know each other, which is one of the goals that they're trying to get at. They have sessions, they have what they call a brilliant fellow who leads, and then an artist. And in each of the sessions, 5 to 10 students connect socially with peers and work on special interest-driven creative projects with physical art materials and also digitally on iPads. To note, they have served 39 participants. They are hoping that year 2, they will expand it to 2 more sites. I'm just making sure I hit everything I need to hit. Yeah, 62% of the staff identify as neurodivergent themselves. So they're both talking the talk and walking the walk. They are, they also have strong, I believe they have strong, yeah, community partners as well. So the only thing that was slightly unclear to me was that it targets, is how is this targeting like sort of the K through 12? I mean, I think it's on the older side of that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but they're really targeting 16 to 38. And I think, you know, trying to get them more employable and which is awesome. But that was my biggest question, is sort of the target, since this is more of a K through 12, is this hitting that target? So that was my only question.
That's a great, I'll just jump in there because that was the one thing I noted on this too, Erin. I think that in terms of eligibility, I'd say review as, you know, though they are eligible with the project that they proposed, and we will have that conversation, I guess, internally about, you know, can we fund a portion that's focused really on that, you know, maybe 16 to 21. So yeah, thank you for calling that out.
Thank you. Oscar.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you. You did a great job on kind of getting the overall view of this. Yeah, just going through this application, I did have a few things that I was kind of just wanting to hear more of, like for example, the project timeline. That in itself is also kind of like mysterious per se. Like they have some keywords or like early February or as of March 2024, but it's more of there's like for example, I've seen other applications who actually give a good rundown of like their day-to-day activities or basis and how or like monthly and how that will end up being implemented, you know, with through all this funding as well. Uh, um yeah, that was like one of the main things that really stood out to me as to how yeah, how is this being managed and how in itself is actually going to improve the quality of, you know, the arts within that too. Which I know will also go in itself with assessment and how they will end up kind of bettering the programming that way. I do enjoy that they do go from hands-on activities to actual also digital art in itself. That's one thing I did enjoy reading about, and how they're able to find creative ways to kind of bring all of those different mediums together.
How about the rest of the panelists? Other thoughts, questions? Samara?
I really liked this also, Erin, and and maybe now I'm bogging us down. We may have come to the spot. I had a question about the budget, and I I wrote, does the tuition, so on the budget page, I was a little confused of whether this is the whole organization's budget or just the project. The tuition being $138,000 of tuition income, and then what, understanding that I don't have a clear sense, what feels like a high expense category for the people. I'm always like, pay the artist, pay the artist. And also for one project, this feels high to me. So, for example, promotion is 12,150. I'm seeing other projects that are, like 300, 1,200. So I'm just a little unclear. I'm a lot unclear about the budget and the expense and the income portion of this. I said the project budget seems high for a program that's serving 80 individuals 2 to 4 times per month. And I think I must be missing something. So if anybody has seen this or has a thought or an explanation or an opinion, I would love that. I mean, everything else for me feels like it really checks some very important boxes, especially sort of multiple communities, multiple locations, pairing up, etc. Yeah, I'd love to throw that out to the group and see if anybody has thoughts.
Not seeing comments.
I'll just jump in and say, my sense is that this is a project, but I had the same initial response and thinking, is this just the organizational budget? I think it's specific to this project, and it might be that the scope of it, they're covering February through, I think the project's, maybe in September, they're looking to expand to 2 more communities, or maybe that's in the new year even. So maybe, I think that that's a really great question, and relates to just the feasibility of the project. You'd like to have seen more detail, an explanation of the budget, but I don't have any answers, unfortunately. Other comments on this one?
So are we ready to score? Looks like it. Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think this is being held up to me. I like I put a wrong number in. So they're asking me to do it again. Give me a second.
Sure,
Now
no
I'm really
problem.
holding us up.
You're fine. There's the official thumbs up from Dale, and we can move on now to the next application is from La Crosse County Historical Society. And Samara, tell us about the application.
Okay, so this is for the Enduring Families Project, Children's Stories, and they're asking 6,000. This is year one of the project. So essentially they're producing 8 books of multicultural stories so that children can, specifically in the La Crosse area, can see themselves reflected in the curricula and within the local history of La Crosse. It's multi-layered implementation. So it includes the actual book. It's got interaction, prompts with questions, living history. It provides a slideshow and also primary documents from that history. So that's kind of the highlight of what the program is. I think it's got strong alignment and is really relevant to us as the Wisconsin Arts Board, local community, history. It's very compelling. I thought it was a strong proposal. I really appreciated, just to highlight this, that they identified and spoke to a community's reluctance to change and why asking why it matters to them is important. And that can be really challenging to sort of move that needle this much in a graceful way. And I thought they did it with grace and substance is what I commented on here. So I appreciate that. Sometimes that's how the change has to happen. I felt like the budget was reasonable. The activities are realistic and well considered. Accessibility, I thought it was really strong through literacy. You know, you've got large print and audio, and given that this is a literacy focused program, I thought that worked. I also would encourage the leader and author to share out that knowledge as part of the project, because it seems like a lot of it is really focused on the head person, this author sort of presenter. I think there's good learning that could happen from that person sharing out. I felt like the evaluation could have been stronger, but it was appropriate enough. There are some good supporting materials that just really help us imagine what it is to be that project in that community, what it actually looks like. You know, I enjoyed looking through their supplemental material. Something else that it's not even a downside, but I said, you know, you could include feedback on how your efforts have been received by this, you know, perhaps reluctant community. I think this it would be a great place for some specific testimonial kind of feedback. But overall, I thought it was really good. I think it will serve the present and the future well. They're creating steps to also ensure documentation and resources for the future, which I love. Yeah, overall, I really liked it. Great letters of support.
Thank you, Samara. And Emily.
I also really loved this project. I really appreciated that throughout the whole process, students are very active participants. They are responsible for finding the information. They are responsible for using critical thinking skills to develop empathy and an understanding of the world around them. And I agreed. I really liked that they were tactfully addressing the question that while that community may be predominantly white, that it is important for us to still build empathy and worldview. I think my 2 areas maybe of question for this involved the budget. The first one is that they are requesting $6,000, but in the expenses column where it's talking about the portion of the grant applied, they're listing that their portion will only add up to $5,925. So I'm interested into where the $75 has mysteriously gone, or if that just is like an attention to detail. Somebody missed something in how that was being divvied out. The other piece that I maybe had as like a red flag was that the deficit has really swung from last year to this year to what they're projecting for next year. And while maybe that's fine, and maybe that isn't actually an area of concern, I guess I was just confused or wondering how we swung from that like $95,000 deficit to an extra $13,000 this year, and then like back again the other way pretty intensely. I just was curious what was happening with that.
Emily, I saw that too. I wondered about the capital campaign that they're in. They were talking about this building, and I couldn't quite follow the explanation and the logic of the pendulum, but I kind of just let it go a little bit. But I hear you. I had the same question.
Other comments? Questions?
Yeah, one thing I'm still kind of a little bit confused about is, yeah, so there's all these like multifaceted like activities, performances with the community. Um, but they do keep bringing up that aspect that they want to create 8 books, right? That reflect, all this different diversity that is in lacrosse. I guess I just would want to understand a little bit more of like what are those like small details that have been doing to be able to get the accurate information that will reflect within the books. Because I think they said that sometime later this year, the first book was going to be issued already. So if that's already in the works of like, going to get printed and everything, I'm kind of curious to hear about like what their process was for that first book to get, initiated and what they will do to accurately convey the community that's there. There's always that like hit or miss, like, yeah, we're trying to do stuff for the community and with the community. At points, sometimes they kind of just neglect the actual community input. So yeah, it's just something that I wish I could read a little bit more of, but yeah, that's what I have.
And I'll jump in there too, Oscar, just to say that because we were really clear with them that we couldn't fund the creation of the books, that might be why there are some details lacking about that piece. It was really, we can fund these sort of dramatized readings and engagement with youth, but not the creation of the books. So.
Thanks for the clarification, Caitlin. Other comments? Then let's move to the scoring portion of this for La Crosse County Historical Society. Okay, great. Moving on to Locomotion Dance Company out of Milwaukee, and Oscar, if you can take the lead on that.
Yeah, so Locomotion Dance Company out of Milwaukee, they're requesting $6,000 for their first year of a project called the Milwaukee Inner City Arts. It's a two-phase program for, I believe it's mainly teens who kind of go through this programming where the first semester kind of focus on the foundation of all the different dance movements and kind of getting the core of it. And then they perform something in the winter. And then they have something also for the spring where they kind of give the students more artistic expression and kind of give them the free range of kind of creating and curating their own show at the end of like May as well. Um, some strengths. I think this proposal overall was clearly outlined and like beautifully structured. It was very easy to kind of just read and navigate through the application. Also, kind of just laying out all the actual like standard chords and national chord standards that they were going to focus on. I thought was pretty amazing and within the assessment methods. So yeah, I think this was one of the strongest applications I read out of all of them. Um, One thing I was kind of just curious about though is with the going back to the budget, um, everything they're asking for is going to go strictly to administrative purposes. So it's more of kind of like trying to navigate around that to see, yeah, I don't know, like is it just mainly going to go for salary and wages and do what they already have is already working well with the current programming that they're going to start off? Um, yeah, or in what way will they be able to kind of compensate, teaching artists if they do end up bringing them in and stuff like that?
Thanks, Oscar. Samara?
Hi. I actually struggled with this one a lot and would love folks' thoughts. My biggest question was, it seems like a great program. Agree that it was really well articulated in the different narrative in the evaluation sections. I struggled with understanding the eligibility of it because it really read to me as a private studio. And that's something that distinctly is not part of the eligibility. And so I actually looked it up so I could better understand. And my understanding is that Locomotion got rebranded as the Milwaukee Something and Cheer Academy. And so the Locomotion portion, as far as I can tell, is a dance studio, and it's amazing. And it's got a great mission of supporting Black and Brown youth and empowering them. Um, and then I think that this Milwaukee, the arts piece, Inner City Arts, is the nonprofit arm of that. So I just was really unclear. And there is a portion in the budget about tuition, and so you've got tuition coming in, and memberships is what they call it, and then and then you've got like your salary and wages and stuff. But I've got like admissions of 40,000. So I just wanted to be really clear that we're not funding a dance studio that's having dance classes for tuition costs. And if we are, it just wasn't addressed in there. Is this a free or reduced tuition that's coming through? There was mention of, and Oscar, maybe you found something in there too that I missed. I know there was mention of schools, and there was a mention, I believe, that some of the classes happen at the schools and some happen at their studio. So that part it made me uncomfortable because I want to make sure that we're supporting, groups that are both doing the important work, obviously, and also that are doing the work that's within the scope of this grant. It was reading to me as like a studio for dance lessons. What are your all thoughts? And I'd be specifically curious about how the grant funding is spent within the project. Is it going to help kids with tuition, support? I just didn't see that in the grant, in the proposal.
And I'll jump in there, Smart, to say we can't
Yeah,
support tuition. So it wouldn't be going to support, or at least the WAB funding wouldn't go toward that. But I had the same questions. I think that and I would love to hear from others first, actually.
I would just say, I wondered that from the initial proposal, the project, and my two questions was that, and also how are they working with community? I think they addressed the community piece really well in the narrative, and I think I kind of lost the other question that you just brought up, that I think is fair. I'm curious what others, because it does read like that, and there isn't a distinguishing piece on how they're integrating beyond being a dance studio.
I just went back to do some rereading about the language, and it does feel like they're asking people to just sign up for classes at the studio. Just based off of the way that the education or the language is talking about students needing to select or sign up for classes. It feels very much like they're asking students to sign up in semester chunks, and then would be I'm assuming, a tuition required experience. I didn't see anything going back through that noted like free experiences or discounted or adjusted experiences for folks if they should need it. So I think they are asking them to sign up for dance classes and like pay tuition for the studio.
Caitlin, can you clarify what you were saying? So we don't offer funds to support tuition. So let's say let's say the only distinction was they said, okay, of this group here, Emily, for different reasons, is going to get a free or reduced class fee schedule, let's say. Can this grant money be used for that? Or if they offer that and we said, okay, well, we'll fund it, but they indicated administration on there, how does that work?
Right. It couldn't be used to offset that tuition cost, but it could be used for, and as I'm reading through it, and I'm sort of just trying to wrap my mind around it too, because they mentioned these partner schools and that participants and families will come from these schools and that the programming will take place at, Bradley Tech or River West Elementary. But then that they are also working with students who are enrolled in classes at Locomotion. So, and I wasn't aware of the sort of MKE Intercity Arts being a maybe separate arm of Locomotion. So,
Like
so
if
what
you
I'm
go to-
saying is if they were applying to work with those students from those high schools, and that it wasn't come sign up for our classes and enroll in our private dance studio, we could certainly pay for artist time dedicated or other administrative fees related to that project. And they're serving those students, in those schools. But we couldn't cover tuition for those students to then just participate in a private lesson. Does that make sense?
I think so.
And I think that leaves us with a lot of questions still.
I'm still left very uncertain. Like, for
Yeah.
example, the Locomotion Dance website is no longer. Now it's I think they ended up doing like the Cheer Academy on a Facebook page.
Okay.
So I think they're both there. It just left me with a lot of questions, like you're saying. And so I don't feel comfortable with a strong vote of confidence without really understanding the model. Because it's a slippery slope, right? Like so many organizations do great work to empower lots of different communities, and they charge for it. And so it just is an important distinction in my mind that I want to support, what we are meant to support.
It's fine if those organizations charge for some if a museum is charging for workshops, and that we don't say that participation needs to be free necessarily, but I think it is the question of, is this a private dance studio where does this go beyond the scope of their work as a dance studio? So I think that this is one that I would say score based on what's in front of you, including your maybe concerns about eligibility, and we will go back to the applicant, if they are recommended for funding, and clarify those questions for sure before we propose to the board that we would support the project.
It kind of has a for-profit vibe. It's one thing to offset fees versus tuition. I think it just throws a huge red flag.
And that's a great, I'm struggling not to say more because I want you all to just assess sort of based on what's been put in front of you. But I do think that there's an eligibility question here, and we will be sure to follow up either way on it.
So can I just ask for clarity? I know you gave it to us. I'm struggling.
I don't know if I gave it to you.
Well, the clarity I'm looking for is, I know you want us, are we now basing it on the content of just what we see without taking into consideration the responsibility side, and you all are going to determine that? Sorry.
Good question.
No, that's a good question, Erin.
It's a great question.
Erin, could I tell you what my interpretation is? For
Please.
me personally, I don't see evidence that this is something that is not a not-for-profit. I'm sorry. This feels for-profit, as Frank was saying. And so in a business, structure, there might be a scholarship fund or a reduced tuition opportunity, but it still feels like and there are parameters that I actually looked up because I was confused that this is one, that a private studio is something that is not funded. So I'm using my evidence to determine like how I'm seeing this project, and making that kind of determination myself. Sorry, maybe that's not clear.
No, that's actually very helpful.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out the numbering side of things because there isn't a number for that. So that's, I think, where I'm getting a little bit, but that was helpful. Thank you.
And this is one that I think that Karen, our assistant director, is listening in on the Zoom, but she's not, or she's listening in on YouTube, but she's not on the Zoom. So I don't want to ask you to hold off on scoring it, but it is a challenging one, and I wish I had more clarity on I would say, I mean, even if it's very well reviewed by all of you, we have eligibility questions, so we will have to go back to the applicant on that. But I think the concerns that you have will likely inform the score that you assign them. If that, there is no way to be diplomatic here.
So shall they move to a score as best able?
I think so.
All right.
Thanks, Jane.
Well, and thanks to all of you. This
Yeah.
is a difficult one, no doubt.
See all of them in there. Thanks, Dale.
Okay, so time to move on to the Madison Jazz Society, Inc. in Middleton, and let's begin with Erin.
Okay, this is Madison Jazz Society from Middleton. They are asking for $5,075. This is year one. This is a program called Discover Jazz. Its outreach offers a hands-on jazz and improvisatory experience to music classrooms grades 6 through 12 during regularly scheduled instruction time, followed by opportunities and engagement for students to participate in jazz enrichment and performance programming outside of those times. There's a strong engagement in the schools. they go into the schools, they physically visit the classrooms, and then those students get invited to participate outside of school in programs that they then have. There is a strong engagement of incorporating UW jazz students, UW-Madison jazz students. And as an aside, I had thoughts on this just as offers, but there are major pedagogical opportunities for the UW-Madison students, especially those that are going to go into some form of education, whether it's into the schools or private studio, et cetera. And I think that in itself is also a side part of it that's really important. Everybody seems to be really excellent and qualified staff. They are getting feedback from the community. They want to break down barriers between professionals and students and avocational musicians, which I think is great. They are doing student interviews, recording attendance, and they are the assistant professor of music education is creating a measurement tool that they will use. The goals, I had a question about assessment, and that is the goals they have set are in line with Wisconsin standards for music, and how are you actually assessing that? I didn't see anything of them getting at it. Are these the metrics that the assistant professor is working on? There was a little bit of ambiguity there. They will have evaluations and surveys, one-on-one interviews of students and participants. One other thing, I had a couple of questions just from my music side, and that is, how are they actually choosing what groups get to participate in the schools? And I come at this from a string player point of view, and that I'm hoping that it is accessible to everybody. I play in multiple different styles and genres, and I think that's a really important skill building set. So I'm hopeful, because I was looking through their documentation, and I saw, standard jazz ensemble instruments with some auxiliary stuff in, but that's just something that doesn't impair my judgment on this. It's just a question of who is actually getting chosen and where are they targeting? Are they only working with jazz ensembles? That wasn't for me quite clear, and I would hope that they would open it up to any and all who want that access and want that opportunity to do that. And I think that is what I have for now.
Thanks, Erin. Samara?
I don't have a great answer, but just one little thing I found, Erin, was it says they go into a school and play music in ensemble to demonstrate blah, blah, blah. We work with as many classes as possible in that day. We estimate 4 classes per visit. So maybe it's not a specific, the ensemble, maybe it is like your music class, but I don't know the answer to that. It's a legit question. Yeah.
I hear that. What I'm wondering is, yeah, like you said, are they general music classes, but they're showing students on instruments that get invited then to their sessions and their like jams. So yeah, it's just a little bit ambiguous for me.
So I felt like this was a strong proposal. It kind of fits into that classic, we need arts education in schools, we get professionals in conjunction with, a university setting or other, students, bring it in, have a demonstration, have an interactive component. It's really an important part of our schools not having that as part of their core curriculum. So that part feels pretty straightforward to me. High merit, good alignment, the budget feels reasonable. The evaluation could be stronger, some good support material, but that White Horse video was great and showed a really dynamic engage. It was fun to watch. My biggest comment was about that I really appreciate this effort to move from in-school to out-of-school time. I think that's a piece that's often missed. You have this support inside the building of your classroom, and what is that next step to evolve into come over to Cafe Coda or wherever, and like stepping into a new environment can be really scary and intimidating, even just to observe, so that piece is really exciting for me when I think about this particular project. So yeah, get really specific and dig in and engage on that part of it, and then bring us feedback. If this is, what is this, the first year? Yeah, this is the first year. So I would really want to see where are the metrics of success around that. And if you're going to refine your evaluation, do it in that spot, because it's really easy to go, oh, the classrooms had a great time, it was fun. So anyway, that's my feedback. I thought it was a strong proposal.
Thanks, Amara. Other panelists want to jump in.
I was looking at just the accessibility portion of this and then community participation. As a musician, like string player as well, I really, really love the idea of allowing kids an opportunity to get out in the community and experiences. That's something that, especially in the state of Wisconsin, just doesn't exist anymore, like it did when I was a kid. I am curious though if instruments will be made available to kids who are wanting to participate in this, because I can see that being a huge barrier of a kid who does not have access to musical instruments really wanting to participate after they visit the school. But if they don't have the ability to access those musical instruments, now they are no longer able to participate in those jazz jam sessions. I also think with the number of like smaller music stores that still exist in the state of Wisconsin, there is a really great opportunity for them to partner with some of those stores, or even with the schools that they're visiting, to see if schools would be willing to provide instruments or rent instruments for students to access. And the other piece of that is I was unclear about how they are ensuring that students are actually making it into those jazz jam programs, rather than having the experience of having folks come play the instruments, having kids intake that, and then the kids are just like, great, cool, that was awesome, loved that I saw some cool instruments today, and that was where it ended. I would love to see some more information maybe about how they are assessing that transfer and ensuring that those kids get there. The other thought, maybe recommendation I had on that, is if they're trying to bridge that gap between in-school programming and after-school programming, is there an opportunity to host some sort of experience in the schools after school hours that would bring kids in who maybe aren't able to find transportation to the jazz jam? Again, that instrument access would make it easier to bridge the gap in an environment that kids are comfortable in, because musical settings can be really intimidating for folks. Art settings can be really intimidating for folks. Just some, I don't know, thoughts.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts?
I just want to piggyback on what Emily said. I agree 100%. And one of my questions was accessibility for instruments. And I think that's why I was questioning how is it tied into the classes? Because I think I think there could be dependence on the school to take care of that side of things. But I think it's a valid question. That's why I'm thinking they didn't. I'm now making assumptions, but I think when you're partnering with the schools, the understanding is you're coming into an already fixed program. But then that brings up the next question of accessibility, and I think that's what you were bringing up. But that's the one thought I would have as to maybe why they're not dealing with it. But certainly an excellent question to ask.
Are you ready to score? Looks like it. All right, let's move on to the scoring for this.
That was really helpful feedback, just a note. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Dale. I just want to say before we move on to the next one that I think any grant writer of any kind would benefit so much from listening to your discussion. You offer such helpful comments, the things that you question. People would learn so much from that to write a better proposal of any sort. So I thank you for how well you're researching this and caring about it. Let's move on to Piano Arts of Wisconsin, Inc. out of Milwaukee. And Oscar, let's begin with you.
Yeah, so Piano Arts of Wisconsin, yes, it's based out of Milwaukee. They're requesting an amount of $3,040 for a project that's for the first year. It's the Wisconsin's musical history with stories of German immigrants. Um, when I was reading through this, so even though they're based out of Milwaukee, it seems like their project is going to be focusing in Platteville. Wisconsin's more of a way to kind of just help bring in the German, music aspect within there. Platteville, demographically is 90% white. So they are focusing on the different kind of like cultural aspects behind that. And it's trying to find the role of how music has with bringing immigrants together. Um, so I think it was just more curating like a concert overall, like kind of just this big event of like a celebration. Um, Strings, I think was more like the curriculum standpoint as well, and kind of just going through that and getting a better understanding as to how they're bringing, these things together, kind of like all this information. Um, and I think one thing for me is like if they're based out of Milwaukee, I'm kind of intrigued as to why or in what way would they be able to then do it here in Milwaukee? Milwaukee is also kind of known to have like a huge, large of like different immigrant like backgrounds and families here. Um, so that's one thing they kind of like. I I don't know if they fully explain it, but kind of understanding like why that or how that partnership came to be with Patville. Yeah, and their needs for them to go over there.
Thank you, Oscar. Aaron.
Yep. Thank you, Oscar. That's a great overview. I would like to add that even though the focus is German immigrants, they're also going to be highlighting other immigrant constituencies in the Platteville area, um, including the Cornish miners and African American farmers living in the Platteville area. I really like the reflective piece that even though the focus again is German immigrants of the area, they're also asking the kids to reflect their own cultural heritage and how do they see themselves in that. I think that's a really great reflective piece for them. I'm wondering, and I think this wasn't clear, this wasn't clear to me, and Oscar, you might have picked up on this, or one of the rest of you may have. Do students have to have a pre-existing background in music to be able to understand what they are trying to do? Like what that's that engagement piece wasn't clear to me. Like, are they starting general so it's really accessible to all, even if they haven't had the music background? Do they have to have some prior knowledge? So that was just a question that I have. I also appreciated for the evaluation piece that they're getting, that they're evaluating during and after, like before, during, and after. So they're constantly getting assessment. And I also appreciated that they were going to reach out to WMTA, which is one of the big music constituencies, that they were going to get an independent observer. I think having, someone not connected and giving observations is a really strong way to go about it. So those were my thoughts.
Thank you, Aaron. Other comments from panelists? Anything catch your eye beyond what you just heard?
I appreciate, oh no, please go ahead, Emily.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the engagement is interesting and unique with the students, teaching polka, it's unique, it's fun, it's a different way of looking at our history, which is what the arts is all about. I had a little I was a little on the non-dominant statement. It felt a little bit vague and not robust, a little passive, but they basically say, it's open to all who wish to participate. And yet I did like the piece about the senior programming and people with memory loss. I think that's a nugget to really dive into as part of the engagement piece of the with community portion of this work, particularly as you think about history and people's own journeys, into the America, et cetera. I was also a little curious about the budget. It felt like it was a low budget, I think was my note. And I wondered if it was realistic to be able to implement this program given that kind of lower looking budget. Impressive as if it is, but those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Samara. Emily?
I just had, I guess, some questions about some of the things that they were looking to assess. I know they were focused in on folks choosing music education as a career in college. I guess was curious how they were planning to measure if more people are choosing music education in college, how they were planning to measure things like more parents seeking music instruction for their students, and then also that retention for music students through that middle school period. I think they talk a little bit about it for the college students where they'll have like roundtable discussions, but I would be intrigued to see more information about how they were planning to measure that retention.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments, concerns? All right, let's move on to scoring, the Piano Arts of Wisconsin proposal. Thank you, Dale. Moving on to Pink Umbrella Theater Company, and Samara, if you can take the lead on that.
You bet. Okay, so this is based in Milwaukee. This is the third year of the program for the project called Porch Play. They are requesting $2,500. They serve about 50 youth, and their goal is to engage families who had it came out of pandemic and engaging isolated families of children with disabilities in the arts. So the most basic part of this is that they select a book and a teaching artist uniquely brings it to life. One of the things they've added is community days as part of the growth of this. Overall, and we could flesh out a little more detail, I feel like it has strong community impact. There's a clear articulation of how they will expand. They're offering 5 additional books as options, and it appears that they're going deeper in their engagement with their partners, which is a really important component of this program. I'm sorry, of this project specifically. It's a very small budget, but I think it reflects the sort of simple and strong format of this program. Like I said earlier, sometimes that simple, more straightforward approach it can be quite effective. And I think that's an example here. And then it allows you to really build partnerships and deepen things like trust building and engagement with your participants, when you can just really hone in on that, the 1 or 2 things that you're doing really, really well. And it seems like this is one of those. I feel like they have a strong identification of the barriers for the people that they serve, finance and transportation. They specifically called out accessibility is embedded into the mission, and their educators are specifically trained to serve these populations. I want to call attention to the fact that their board and staff have a large population of folks with lived experience of disability, which adds to the overall sort of gravitas of this group of people and the programming they're able to provide. One of the things I liked about the growth is that I appreciate that they looked at feedback and they shifted from this in-home idea, which they thought was what was needed at the time, right? And then they went, oh, okay, I get it. Like, we knew that we wanted to come to you, but now we understand that we also need to come to you in community and in other places. And so they now have a broader reach into public spaces and partner organizations. I felt like this was a good example of using the past 2 years to inform some best practices. So overall, I thought it was a strong proposal. It's a good model for slow growth. And I wrote, I encourage you to apply for larger funds in the future with careful spending and allocation. Be sure to compensate your artists and really lean into those partnerships, which you're creating a really strong foundation for. The last thing is they have this pre-session questionnaire, which is so cool. It's a way to learn more about the child and tailor a meaningful experience of that book. So, what is their personality like? Are they a little, like they called out, like, maybe there's a birthday coming up. So then we do, Dragons Love Tacos because it has a celebratory theme. I mean, creating something that is that unique before the session starts is also really exciting and indicates a genuine, authentic desire to serve their population. Okay, that's it. Sorry.
Oh, that's great, Samara. Thank you. Frank, unmute. You did it.
Yep, I did. I'm learning. So some things that I really enjoyed about the proposal is the idea of bringing those performances to the individual's home. I thought that was really neat. There's a line that says that families will register for a 45-minute experience with a trained teaching artist at their home or nearby community space. I like the idea of, I'm not a firm believer of like, if you build it, they will come. I feel like you have this great thing once you go into the community, right? Especially with students with disabilities or not having access to transportation. I think it's a really cool, neat thing to be able to provide those services. I also thought that engaging young people in the arts is very important. And I really grabbed on to the fact that the Pink Umbrella Theater is in a process of creating their own theater standards, which I think is very important. And also that they're referring to the Department of Public Instruction, which is fabulous. Those are things that I look for. But also the fact that Samara mentioned about the pre-assessment, that is a key factor in any type of programming. Like, is this really a need versus a want, right? So it's obviously it's a need. And then a question that I have is just teaching artist expenses, especially when they're traveling to these homes. I'm assuming they're probably gonna be driving their own vehicles, wear and tear, mileage. Those are things that I'm also interested too, as far as how to not only properly compensate them for their time and experience and expertise, but also those little miscellaneous things that we often tend to ignore.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Open it up for further discussion from the panelists. Anything to add? Anything to question? Emily?
I think just maybe like on the topic of things that are exciting, Samara, you pointed out the like pre-program catering the program to that child. I also wanted to point out that their evaluation methods grow with the participants the more often they participate in the program. So the first evaluation is just assessing their overall experience, but then if they continue to participate in the program after that, it morphs to include educational value, and they start assessing the participants' understanding of the story elements and observations that they've made. So the program really can grow with the students, which really encourages them to participate more often. This program is very cool. I'm very excited about it.
And I think another thing too, is it gives those students a sense of ownership. That their input is very valuable in growing this program. I'm not sure if they would be aware of that, but I think the parents would be, that they're a huge part of the success of this program.
Cool. Any other comments? Let's move to scoring. Thank you all. Let's move to Play-by-Play Theater Inc.'s application, and that is coming to us from Green Bay. And Emily, you're taking the lead on this.
Okay, so Play-by-Play Theater Incorporated is located in Green Bay. They are requesting $2,000 to support the first year of the Percy Project, which is the name of their program. The Percy Project is an immersive theater experience that's geared towards K-2 students in underserved schools in the Green Bay public school system, and includes opportunities from performance all the way up to professional development sessions and in-person artist workshops prior to the performance. So some strengths for this proposal included that there is a very clear timeline of when each step of the process is expected to be completed or engaged in. I think they did a really good job of ensuring that not only we understood, but everyone in the project understood what was expected of them as they moved through. I also really appreciated that they made an effort to meet educators and schools where they were at. If schools really only had the resources to accommodate a performance of the project, that was something that they were willing to accomplish for them. But if schools and educators had the resources, time, availability, or desire to really dive all the way in and go into arts education curriculum that was specifically developed for the program, participate in professional development, and have artists in residence come to their schools to run programs, that the organization was willing to accommodate those requests as well. The flexibility for that, I think, is really important, especially when you're looking at running things with kindergartners and first graders and second graders who maybe, depending on the school that they're in, might not have the bandwidth to sit for programs that are that long. The other thing that I think that was really unique and exciting about this was that the community involvement during the planning stages was incredibly in-depth. They had conversations with board members, with parents, with educators, with other folks who were involved in the Green Bay public school system to really figure out what the school needed, what gaps needed to be filled, and what grade levels or students would be the ones that would gain the most from programs like this. I also really appreciated that when they were developing the curriculum, they had someone on board on staff whose sole job was to make sure that that curriculum was developed in a meaningful way. I would be interested, I guess, to know, as this organization is something that really relies heavily on community support, when they were going through their budgeting as well, like there is no income or no donation listed from community organizations, private support, corporate support, foundation support, like there just is nothing honed into that. So I'd be, I guess, interested to know what they're tapped into that way. But Overall, I think this is a really unique program. I really love the opportunities that they're giving to students and to teachers through this.
Thanks, Emily. Oscar.
Yeah, Emily, no, thank you for kind of doing the whole shabazz around that. Yeah, I think what I enjoyed about this was the arts integration aspect as well, the importance of bringing in various kind of just subject matters into one specific lesson, for these young youth to kind of understand the aspects of like, the lesson being handed to them. Also did enjoy like the three tiers. So yeah, based on where the schools are at, that's what kind of the experience they would want to be able to choose from. Um, Also, I think I read something wrong. Like they also work hand in hand with like the school literary specialist, to also kind of help the people going into these classrooms to understand the level of the students and kind of be able to navigate their lessons through that as well. So this whole kind of proposal just kind of shows this continuous kind of evolution and process that they're also going and kind of making sure everything they do is at a good level for everybody to be able to understand and go on forth with it.
Thanks, Oscar. Other panelists, did you have any comments, questions, concerns?
This is
Okay.
kind of vague, but let me just jump in and say, Emily, you kind of addressed this. I think part of this whole process, which is exciting, and hopefully the applicants participate in this or hear that feedback, is understanding or kind of throwing it out there to say, how does this project have value, and where do we sit in the arts landscape overall, and projects like this that feel like straightforward, but maybe the budget is quite low. My hope is that it can be kind of this guiding like bit of encouragement to say, yeah, this, we support you, or we support you in this way with these recommendations. Go forth and prosper. Maybe this can be kind of a jumping off point for some of these groups to kind of get the bravery or the resources to really go and try to find a way to, as you're saying, Emily, get some other foundation support. So, you're compensating your artists and you're growing options. Anyway, just an observation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samara. I think that's I'll chime in just to say that that's always our hope too. Once they've completed this really comprehensive application in phase 2, you have this narrative, you've worked through a budget. We hope that, the Arts Board can just be a stamp of approval to other grantors to say, hey, this is a really valid project. We want to put it in front of you as well. So thanks for calling that out.
Thank you. Other comments from panelists? Then let's move into scoring on the play-by-play theater proposal. Thank you, Dale. And the next proposal is the Prairie Music and Arts Inc. proposal from Sun Prairie. And Frank, we're on to you.
Okay, so the Prairie, the Prairie Music and Arts Incorporated is from Sun Prairie, and they're requesting $6,000. The go-kart, which stands for Community Arts Recreation Trailer, is a pilot project between Prairie Music and Arts and Sun Prairie Parks Recreation and Forestry, taking arts-based and recreational experiences directly to the youth at Sun Prairie's parks during the summer and out of the school days during the school year. Educational arts activities include arts and crafts, theater, improvisation, group music making, dance exploration, and a great artist performance series. Recreational experiences include group sports and lawn games. Some of the the strengths that I noted is that this program provides equitable and accessible year-round arts and recreational education to youth. They support the emotional and physical well-being and academic growth of the youth. And also this project is used as a vehicle to strengthen the community and support of local schools. One of the things that really caught my attention is the fact that this program is a collaboration between two partners versus recruiting partners for other types of supports. I think the inception of this program or project can definitely grow because both entities are sharing resources that can benefit the community and the youth. And also that it really isn't about just like sitting at a table making art. It's really getting kids to move around, which is always nice. I didn't have any specific questions about it. So I'm open to questions and comments. But I thought that it was a good proposal to provide that extra layer to students. And also the fact that they're working with local schools to provide this extra program. And the fact that it's at a pilot stage, I think is really good. It just shows me that they have a vision of what it can look like. Obviously, at the end of the year, things can be improved on or redeveloped. But it's kind of where I am with that particular project.
Thanks, Frank. Emily?
I think it is just like exceptionally evident in this proposal that a lot of care has gone into the programs that they are trying to bring to the community. With both the collaboration with the Parks Department and then also in their proposal, they talked about how they had conversations with local government agencies so that they could really identify the types of programs that are higher in investment and therefore don't exist as much or to the degree that they would like them to in their community, so that those can be programs that they bring to the parks, to the community through this go-kart experience. I also really appreciated that they took time to gather information about gathering places in the neighborhoods. They aren't just picking parks or locations based off of where they think the most traffic will be or where they think that people gather in those communities. They really took the time to investigate where people actually are gathering so they can make sure that this is reaching the most people as possible. And then also to investigate income status of the neighborhoods that they're visiting, the cultural makeup of the neighborhoods that they're visiting, so that this really is an experience where people are getting programs and arts education that they don't have access to based off of the communities that they're living in.
Are there other comments? Thank you, Emily. Other comments from panelists?
I was going to just shout out one specific thing that Frank, you were talking about how critical partnerships are. I have found that having city and school district access to data can be so tremendously helpful. And so what a smart partnership if you can do that. And then like you're talking about zip codes and so really leaning into those strategic partnerships that of course do good work and will serve youth and also provide an opportunity for like sustained reflection and growth. Also, I mean, the trailer wrap looks very cool. Everybody loves a trailer wrap.
And I think one more layer to this is that by creating this pilot program between two entities, it creates that accountability, which I think is very important because I would assume that these entities want this to be a successful project or program. So I think by taking that partnership to another level, it really kind of embeds them into the conversations, which I think are very important.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we move to scoring? All right, let's score Prairie Music and Arts Inc. proposal.
Great. Thank you all. We have a lunch break. I want to give you the option. Do you want to take the full 30 minutes? Is that good for everyone? Does more time, less time? We're a little ahead, so I'll let you decide.
I need to step out to grab some food, so I'd love
Yeah.
a little time to do that
Okay,
and not eat in front of all of you.
That sounds great. Nobody wants to eat lunch over Zoom. Let's do 12:30 then. We'll reconvene.
Especially if it's live streamed.
Yeah, we don't, nobody needs to see that.
Nobody needs that, right?
How embarrassing would that be? Oh, that's great.
Well, I will.
30 then.
Yeah, let's do 12:30. I'm gonna just end the meeting and then we can hop back on the same Zoom link at 12:30. Great.